Our next session is the green transition, unlocking new business opportunities and capital. We've got three speakers: Gabriel Alonso, President and CEO of 547 Energy. Please join me on the stage. Aristos Constantine, Trade Commissioner of the Republic of Cyprus, North America, and Antonios Peppa, CEO of ETME. ETME. Delighted to have you all, and I'm sure you're going to pick up on stuff that's already been said earlier in the day, and particularly in the energy panel. I hope you all managed to listen in on that one. So the format for this session is everybody's got about 5 minutes to present what they think are the main priorities for the green transition. And then we're going to have a Q&A and a conversation. So let's start.
We say it's great to see you in person. Last time we did this was back
online.
In 2020 online, Speaking of which, I couldn't help but sort of think back to our conversation back in 2020, and it was at the height of the pandemic. And oddly enough, as surprising as it may seem, despite the dramatic developments that have taken place since then, I found that a lot of the outlook that I expressed then remains relatively valid. And I mean, look, let's be realistic. Nobody could have predicted the Russia invasion into Ukraine and the situation we find ourselves in now. But my point is this: is that the war, much as the pandemic did, I think, revealed pre-existing vulnerabilities and added a degree of urgency to many issues that were, to varying degrees, already in motion. And I think that's very much true when it comes to the green transition. And certainly, renewables have gotten a massive push. I'm sorry, is this not on? So, as I was saying, renewables have definitely been given a push, and the urgency has accelerated, and now it's no longer a question simply of climate goals. It is also a question of energy security. And so it changes the way we look at things. In that respect, again, going back to what I'd said back then, the East Med has an important role to play. Whether or not, and I think we've heard that natural gas is a bridge fuel and is not going anywhere anytime soon. So whether it's in the East Med's capacity to provide an alternative to Russian gas, or if it is looking at the infrastructure development such as the Eurasia interconnector, which is massively important, and hopefully we'll see a Euro-Africa interconnector as well. The importance of the region and the 3+1 relationship that we've heard a lot about today remains critically important. Another point we touched on, I think, was the fragility of supply chains, and how there was a need then, there was an urgency then to diversify supply, to create shorter, smarter supply chains. The buzzwords then were nearshoring and reshoring and onshoring. And that also remains true in the green transition. As my fellow panelists here pointed out, the critical minerals, the rare earth minerals that are going to be required are immense. And I said back then, if you recall, the European Union needs to look to the Mediterranean, needs to look to Africa. And the ambitious goals that we've put in place on the green transition make that even more true today. And I think the nascent EU Global Gateway initiative fully recognizes that reality, and in fact emphasizes its pursuit of partnerships with African countries in line with ESG principles that provide a viable alternative to China's Belt and Road. And The US-led G7 B3W initiative does the same thing. And in this respect, once again, Cyprus, I think, and the East Med in general, can play a pivotal role in connecting Europe, Africa, and the Middle East, and particularly Cyprus, given its the fact that it is a European Union member. It is a common law jurisdiction, has exceedingly sophisticated financial services and funds industry, I think can play a very proactive and valuable role in facilitating EU and US investment into these markets.
Great, thanks very much. Now for Q&A and discussion, and several hands. So I do hope that we can continue some of the discussion from the previous energy session. So let's take, let's take you first, the lady at the back there.
So my name is Paola Patelli, and I'm currently working as an independent consultant with the International Institute for Sustainable Development. On climate change issues, we follow climate change negotiations and the 2030 agenda negotiations. The current situation in the Ukraine has really brought reality and pragmatism in terms of energy security to the fore. Would that warrant, for example, and this is just a hypothetical question, that countries maybe revise their NDCs and the level of ambition that they have? And also with regards to corporate social responsibility, ESG, there's increased scrutiny through the Securities Exchange Commission on companies taking on climate change objectives. So I'm wondering whether, because of the situation in the Ukraine, both corporate entities and government entities could, or perhaps should, look at their ambitions and goals and maybe check them against reality, the current reality. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. Anybody would like to come back on
in this question? I think, if I may, first of all, as regards to governmental part, the REPowerEU is the answer. So the goal is to increase the renewable energy sources, the green transition. So this is very clear from the European Union perspective. I think also this goes along with the USA policy and politics right now. So I think on the top level we will not go back. We don't have a step back. On the contrary, it is an accelerator of things in both governmental level, but also company level. And I think that companies, they will increase their investment, but I think, Alonso, you can be even more precise on this.
No, I mean, I think we don't need more goals. I mean, we don't need more ambition. I mean, I think that previous goals were good enough. I mean, I don't think the industry needs more capital. The issue is that the execution of projects in Europe, it's becoming extremely complicated. The licensing processes in some countries in Europe takes more than a decade to permit. If we believe that energy independence, energy security, and we want it to be from sources within in Europe, politicians will have to take ownership and push forward the agenda. And I'm sorry, some people's feelings make it hurt in the process, but the overall benefit, the good that it needs to be pursued, will be achieved. I think that's the reality. I mean, from my experience, I've been developing projects in Europe for more than 2 decades, and it takes forever now.
On the, I think the last part that's left, and correct me if I'm wrong, you mentioned, I think you were referencing the DWS issue this morning, the Deutsche Bank issue with the ESG reporting. In that respect, it's a factor. I think there is some controversy regarding ESG reporting, and I think there's room for greater clarity on what the benchmarks are, and that will undoubtedly get cleared up by regulators as we go forward. I don't foresee that as being an impediment or an issue really in the realization of either the green transition goals or energy development projects in general.
I'd like to have your view on this, because I often tell people we're not having an energy crisis. We're having two energy crises. We're having an energy cost crisis that started actually quite a while back. And then we have an energy security crisis, which of course to a large extent has developed because of Russia's aggression. But we also have a third crisis around the corner, which is the commodity crisis. Because as you pointed out, electric vehicles, fantastic. They require about 8 times the minerals of a conventional car. Wind energy, I am a very strong supporter of wind energy, but in order to generate the same load as the CCGT, you're going to need about 16 times the mineral input. And of course, as you pointed out, these minerals are not found in the easiest of places. Now, we're already suffering from a dependency that our partners effectively have weaponized. We are in the future looking at dependencies on other geographies which are also complex. How do we learn from our, I'm not saying mistakes, but I'm saying our experiences today to actually put in place the mechanisms so that we are not jeopardizing the transition that we're all backing by 5 years from now finding ourselves having moved away from the energy crisis but right into a commodity crisis.
Thanks. Any final questions from the floor? Yes, gentleman here.
With your point that it takes 10 years, 20 years for projects in Europe, are Europeans doing enough to get ready for the increase and for the competition that they will have for commodities, whether they be natural gas or otherwise, et cetera?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So who wants to respond?
So on the critical minerals and the rare earth minerals, you're absolutely right. And I wouldn't say it's coming, I'd say it's here. That's the reality. And Gabriel can probably give you more specific examples. But as I mentioned, there are initiatives to try and address this. Whether or not they can and will be successful in time to alleviate the issue remains to be seen. And, you know, sort of combining the two questions, in the short term, this, as you quite rightly said, we're looking at this in time. There's short term, there's medium term, and there's long term. In the short term, there is a lot of pain. That's just how it is, right? There already is, and there will be more. You know, to coin a phrase, winter is coming, and it's likely going to get worse. I mean, Europe is, the long contracts are going to Asia. There's over-reliance on spot. Prices are going to go up, energy prices go up, everything goes up. People suffer. I'm hopeful that I'm wrong, but that's what it looks like right now, at least in the short term, unless something changes dramatically. That's my 2 cents.
I would say that very good. I think the answer could take forever, to be frank, but on the commodity crisis, quick comment is that we need to be mindful that mining as an industry moves at glacial pace, right? I mean, pretending that we can start mining and something will happen in the next week, the next year, or the next 5 years is going to be complicated. However, I mean, we need to move now, correct? There are multiple fronts where the industry has to work because an energy transition like the one we all envision and we all want, it doesn't happen under the old structures. You need to change several structures.
Thanks.
For the last part, which is quite important, the licensing, I'm more optimistic because also in the REPowerEU, it is mentioned that the licensing has to become less of a factor of a problem. But apart from that, energy projects, no matter what kind of energy source it is, they take time. It's the nature of the energy industry that it has long lead times.
A friend recently said to me, climate change is as much about change as it is about climate. It's about changing the way we do things. This is not going to be a 180 pivot that's going to happen overnight.
Somebody said in the earlier panel, actually, that nobody disagrees about the end goals. We can, debate how we're going to get there and what's the, the best method for getting there. And I think, what was said this morning, I can't remember who said it. Actually, it was probably David Harris, because he, has had a good turn of phrase. And he said the pragmatists have now got to take charge over the purists. And I think that's the kind of discussion that we've had today, a more nuanced discussion about the green transition and how we're going to reach these targets. So thank you very much, everybody who's contributed through your questions and your introductions to that discussion. Thanks to the panel.